Aloha, how are we doing tonight? So, since my last stream, I have really dove into how to work StreamYard. So, needless to say, tonight we will not be having the hiccups we had a couple of nights ago. So, I'm very happy to say that. Well, hello, Fringe fam. Hello, the rest of you too. If you guys are watching this as a replay, welcome. I'm not entirely sure how long this will be. Planned for maybe 30 minutes. It's not much to cover. We're going to be discussing how the collapse of the US dollar has officially begun. And I'll tell you why. I'm going to go into that today. We're going to be reading some articles. I just want to say hey to everybody that shows up. You're welcome to ask me any questions. Be sure to put at Viticus Rising, though, because in the software that I'm in, it doesn't highlight my name, but I'll see it much easier if you guys do it that way. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to get into this now. We're going to start looking at something that the Fed just announced, is that they're going to start buying ETFs. And not just any old ETFs, they're buying what's considered junk bonds. So junk bonds is basically what the credit agencies has gone from what is investment grade credit or bonds to junk bonds. It means there's no investment in it. There's no money to be made in it. And so the Federal Reserve has often been called the buyer of last resort. Well, they're no longer the buyer of last resort. They're the only buyer. And this is why we've been seeing our stock markets go up, even though the world around it is falling apart, is because the Fed has been buying junk bonds, ETFs, stock bonds. It doesn't matter. Corporate debt, you name it, they've bought it. And so they're providing all this additional liquidity. They've been dumping hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars into the repo market. That started in September, I believe. And that was actually the first sign of our economy starting to tank. You see, we were already headed towards a financial collapse. It's just a matter of time. And I'll get into that. Now, we had a couple of warning signs in September and October. The same warning signs we had during the global financial crisis in 2007 and 2008. And so we're going to get into this now. I'm going to share this. And what we're going to do is we're going to read through some of this. And so it says that the Fed is going to buy ETFs. What does this mean? You notice right here, it says that the central bank is propping up the bond in the most efficient manner possible. That is a load of shit. It is what they're really trying to say is that they've thrown everything at the kitchen sink at it, and this is all they have left. So if we look here, it says the Federal Reserve on Monday announced a fresh round of stimulus designed to calm markets and buffer the hit to the economy from the coronavirus pandemic. Among other steps, the Fed said it would buy exchange-traded funds that track the corporate bond market for the first time in the central bank. So essentially, they're just going in, they're swooping in, and they're buying everything, right? So is that the fact that they're buying this is very worrisome because it means that they're in such crisis mode that the economy is literally tanking so bad. They are doing everything and anything that they can to keep it afloat. Now, I don't know why. And I guess that's the big question today is this collapse being controlled or is it being orchestrated? Right? Is this something that is just we're doing our best to mitigate the damage short term because most of these people won't be alive for when it really hits us long term? Or is it a controlled demolition, right? Or is it a planned demolition? So we're going to get into this. I'm going to leave myself here, but I'm going to go back to this. And then I'm going to show you guys something that's really bad. This was in January 8th of 2007, okay? And this is when our stock markets hit a yield curve. It's with the bonds. So I'm going to read just a little bit of this right now. The guy says, I love the serendipity when two separate analysts show up saying the opposite thing. Such was the case this weekend when I was looking at Art Lafer's recent commentary on the yield curve. This morning, the WSJ front page had an article of the same subject. And basically, they're just going on there and saying that the yield curve was no big deal, that it's not a sign of the, here it says right here is, I have said it, an inverted yield curve is a warning sign. The longer and deeper the curve is inverted, the more meaningful a slowdown we are likely to get. Now, we had that yield curve happen in 2007. And then a year later, it took some time, it happened in 2008. Now, then we had the global financial crisis, where the lowest 1 point drop we had was 770 points, 777 to be exact. So we were already headed for this collapse. All we did was put a Band-Aid on our economy in 2007. And then we've been propping up the economy ever since. It's been a zombie economy. And we've just been printing more and more and more and more and more because we can, because of the world reserve currency. Now look at this. This is the next one. This was in, you guessed it, August 14th, 2019. The inverted yield curve explained and what it means for your money. Here's just the key points. An inverted yield curve means the interest rates have flip-flopped on the U.S. Treasuries and the short-term bond paying more than long-term bonds. It is generally regarded as a warning sign for the economy and the markets. A recession, if it comes at all, usually appears many months after a yield curve inversion. So we were already headed towards a global recession. So the situation has become that anytime we see an inverted yield curve, a recession, it follows. Now, we had two yield curves, inverted yield curves, happen almost back to back in terms of time. They weren't like day to day, but within a few months, we had two of them. And that's terribly gone. Yes, a zombie economy. It's absolutely a zombie economy. So we have gotten to the situation now where we're just printing, we're printing money. And the problem with that is we're headed down a very dangerous path, a path that has already been mapped out for us as the end result to what happens when you print money into infinity. You see, Trump has been saying this over and over again about how we have a strong dollar, we have a strong dollar, we have a strong dollar, right? It's not, he's not lying about that, but that's not a good thing, because in this landscape, having a strong dollar means it's harder for other people to trade. It's harder for us to get more exports and imports. And that's not happening anyway, because the whole world's shut down. So therefore, the need for the dollar is dissipating. The Russia oil price war is to dethrone the dollar, because if we're no longer the number one producer of oil in the world, and our economy is no longer the number one economy in the world, why do we need to be the world reserve currency? And you couple that with the fact that Jerome Powell, who is the chairman of the Fed, has even stated himself that everything they're doing is not really working. They're doing everything they can to keep it from going over the cliff. Trump, there's been not necessarily a rumor, but an unconfirmed report that Trump is supposed to be taking over the Fed, that they're going to merge the Fed with the Treasury, but there's no signs of that as of yet. The Fed is still continuously doing what it wants, how it wants, with our approval. The Fed pretty much owns us. I don't think we own the Fed. So we're going to get in this situation here where, if we look at this next article, we're going to get into Zimbabwe. Okay, this is where we're headed. This is why the collapse of the dollar has begun. Now, what you see on your screen is the bills that were printed in Zimbabwe from the time that they're, the most recent printing up until back before they had hyperinflation. Now, if you look, what we're doing right here is it starts with 10, 20, 50, 100. It all looks normal, right? And then you start getting into the 50,000, 100,000, 500,000. So this is the $100 billion bill. And that's not even the biggest bill. We look here. This is currently the highest bill that Zimbabwe has, the $100 trillion. And make no mistake, that's a real picture. It's printed in 2008. So here's the deal. If if you look at this here, actually, let me go back and make this bigger so you guys can see this. All right. So what you see here is a map of the Zimbabwe dollar to the US dollar, how strong it was. Now you look at 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005, no big deal, keeps going up. 2006, 2007, and 2008. Now, after 2008, if you look, it skyrockets. The chart on the numbers on the left is the dollars versus the US dollar. And around 1/1/2008, it was at about 1,000. It was 10 to the power of 10. I think that's like $1 million or something like that, unless I'm mistaken. But if you go up to 2009, you see how much of a disparity it was in their economy because they created hyperinflation. Now, how did they create hyperinflation? Well, we're going to read that. All right, so here's the deal. Now I'm going to read this, and that way I can get back on the screen. Here we go. All right, so let me go ahead and read this for you. Here's the reason why, and tell me if this sounds familiar. So a little bit of inflation is acceptable, or rather desirable for any economy as it boosts its growth. Most countries try to maintain their inflation rate at around 2%, but Zimbabwe is facing hyperinflation, which is, I think that's 5 billion percent. Now let's look up and see when this was written. Now this was in, I believe, 2012. And if you look at their economy, they still haven't recovered. So how did it come to this? Well, it didn't happen in a day, obviously. It started in the 1990s when President Robert Mugabe instituted land reforms intended to redistribute land from white landowners to black farmers to correct the injustices of colonialism. However, this turned out to be a disastrous move and started off a chain reaction. Read on to know how. Number one, many of the black farmers had no experience or training in farming. Food production started dropping sharply. Pay attention to that. Food prices began to rise. Pay attention to that. Inflation. Government had to print more money to provide subsidies for the poor and the food. Further inflation. Does that sound familiar? Number two, the USA, the European Union, and the IMF imposed sanctions upon Zimbabwe for snatching up land away from the whites. Zimbabweans working abroad just lost their jobs, and Zimbabwean businesses invested abroad, forcing to roll back their investments. What did we do? We invested abroad. So unemployment in the country increases. Sounds familiar. Government prints more money to support the unemployed population. More inflation. Number three, the inexperienced farmers who lost their crops failed to repay their loans to the banks they had borrowed from. Increasing bad debts caused a collapse of the banking sector. Well, that's coming. The government had to intervene to try and resurrect the banks. More money printed yet again. By this time, the inflation had already reached uncontrollable levels. It had become self-perpetuating. You need more money to buy things, but the more money you print, the more it loses its value. A downward spiral. The government started printing notes of higher denominations, upwards of $1 million Zimbabwe dollars. By 2008, inflation had already crossed the 1 million percent mark. 1 million percent inflation. The price of each commodity was doubling itself in just a matter of a couple of days. An egg costed $2,000 in a day. It costed $4,000 2 days later. When such a thing happens, people lose faith in their currency. And that's very important because we just had our consumer confidence come out, and it's the lowest it's ever been in history. Make no mistake. And a currency, it doesn't matter what it's backed by, even by gold or anything else. A currency will only have value so long as the people have faith in the value of that currency. If they lose faith in that value, they lose faith in gold. Gold becomes a useless metal. If we lose faith in silver, if we lose faith in anything, it's only valuable because society has deemed it to be valuable. Anyway, so they are not sure whether they could be worthy of anything even the next day. They go on a buying spree. They want to hoard essential items for future since prices are skyrocketing. This increases demand for goods. As far as we know, as demand rises, prices rise. Complete disaster. People had to carry a bag full of money to buy a loaf of bread. A cup of coffee costed trillions of dollars. So if you think we're not headed down that direction, we absolutely are. Because the more that we print, the less value that our dollar has. So let's look at this. Murphy's Law says if metals are to become not valuable, then why did everybody buy all that silver? Well, the reason, so this is kind of an interesting thing. The way that we currently work, we have two different types of markets going on at the same time. You have ETF paper gold and ETF paper silver on the one hand, and then on the other hand, you have physical gold and physical silver. So because we have shut down all of our businesses, we've shut down mining of silver, we've shut down the mining of gold. Now, even though that silver is there, we're not mining it. So what is available on the surface is finite, very finite and limited. What happens is that when the market started crashing here just a couple of months back, these companies and these stockholders had to make what's called margin calls. So the only way to make margin calls is to sell the paper contracts of gold, which is what you see the spot price online. Now, they don't actually own those precious metals. Once the economy started tanking, people usually start investing in gold and silver because they have always been safe havens. Silver has a 5,000-year history as a currency, and gold has a 6,000-year history. So it's based off of that history that we keep faith that it has value. However, if you were to have a complete breakdown of society where there is no more, laws and no more rules, and there's no government that's going to prevail, it goes to like Walking Dead style. Well, then gold will be thrown in the silvers, and silver will be thrown in the silvers. But we're flocking to it because it has always been a safe haven in times of paper fiat currency disasters. Every fiat paper that we have ever seen has crashed and burned. The denarii was the same way. The denarii of Rome used to be gold, and then they switched over to a different type of metal. It's not the reason why they fell, but their currency went away. So we're absolutely headed that way. If we have a complete collapse, then yes, gold and silver is worthless. The only thing that's worth anything is food and water and ammo, and gasoline, stuff like that, propane, that stuff that human beings need. But until that happens, people will always flock with gold and silver. And the reason why it's gone is because government and banks have been buying it up too. They've been buying the physical stuff and not the paper stuff. You see, when all these people online go to call in for their gold contracts that they bought through whatever Robinhood investments or stuff like that, they're going to say, sorry, we can't give it to you, because they never actually hold that gold physically. And if you don't own it, you don't hold it, you don't own it. And so that's why people flock to it, is because it is a historical safe asset. Now, if society were to completely collapse, you got to think that society this time around started about 7,000 years ago. If this cycle of society collapses, gold will be worthless. It won't be worth anything. Silver won't be worth anything. But lettuce, tomatoes, and onions will. And in my last video, I was talking about how we're absolutely gutting our farming industry. We're telling dairies to sell their cows. We're having to dump milk by the millions of gallons. We're having to dump eggs out. And it's not just because we can't sell them or because of inflation. It's because all of the processing plants that create the canned goods, that create the bottles, that put milks in, that creates the cartons, that eggs, they're shut down. A lot of these trucking companies have been going bankrupt for the last 18 months. The what we call the retail apocalypse has been happening for the last 18 months. This crash was happening regardless. See, when you create an everything bubble economy, all you need is a catalyst. And what that catalyst is just a simple pinprick. This virus, whether it's a hoax, whether it's real, whether it's man-made or natural, it's definitely not a bioweapon. I can tell you it's not a bioweapon. Because if it's a bioweapon, they need to be fired. It's a terrible bioweapon. regardless of what that was the catalyst for this economy to come crashing down. And it was the perfect cover too, even if it's just coincidental. If you believe that this just so happened to coincide, it's the perfect cover. We can blame the virus. We can blame China, right? Because that's where we're headed. Make no mistake. When our dollar starts to collapse, we're already going into Venezuela. Why do you think we went to the Caribbean? We didn't go there for drug trafficking. We went there to encircle the Panama Canal, and we went there to invade Venezuela. I think we're going to take their oil or do something of that matter. I don't know. But we've been shifting our words to very much more harshly towards China. I think our Secretary of Defense, one of those dumb secretaries, said that China is a real threat to us now. And we're about to be dethroned as the king of the hill. And Americans aren't ready for that. Rome wasn't ready for it. Egypt wasn't ready for it. Greece wasn't ready for it. Assyria wasn't ready for it. Babylon wasn't ready for it. The Sumerians weren't ready for it. Every one of them said, not me, not this time. The truth is the one thing that humanity learns from history is the simple fact that we don't learn anything from history. So you said that patriots knew the economy was going to crash. Well, it's not even just patriots. Anybody with a head, with a mind, could have told you that it was going to crash. The problem is that those people have gotten smaller and smaller and smaller these days because we don't. They just dumbed us down. So we're trying to prevent Russia from getting Venezuela. Now that might be true. Might absolutely be true. It could be that. But here's the thing. We're in a world now where why pick one or the other? It could be fucking everything, right? We have so many things going on right now. We've got, we're supposed to be arresting them, and I saw that. But see, the thing is, we've already installed a puppet dictator, and it didn't work, right? When that guy seized power from Geraldo, for all of like maybe a week, and then he got starved out of his house pretty much. Yeah, it could be. It could be Russia. It could be that we're trying to stop Russia from invading, or Russia's stopping us from. Either way, there's going to be a war in Venezuela. Whoever the side is, wherever that makes no difference. War is the end point. We've got war. We've got a grand solar minimum. We've got 18 trillion locusts. We've got billions and billions of mice eating all the crops. We've got massive food shortages across the world. So we got all of these things occurring at once. And by the way, pandemics happen during a grand solar minimum. Whether or not this was released intentionally, I believe it was man-made. I believe it was man-made to get us sheltered in place. I believe that is the only thing that makes sense. Because we've been passing law after law after law to now it is a law. There's a new law into effect that you cannot sue any company whatsoever. You can't sue the federal government. You can't sue the Federal Reserve. Anyone, if you are exposed to this virus while on the job, and you get sick from it, even if they did not practice the social distancing guidelines, even if they told you don't wear masks, don't wear gloves, and you get this, if you die, you cannot sue anybody for it. And that's a law now. And a lot of people don't even know about that. Yeah, so if we have mice eating crops, it means baby mice. And see, that's the thing is, here's what has spread almost every virus in history. It's been from rats. It's been from mice. And when it's not, it's from birds and it's from pigs. And make no mistake, China is in a very bad situation. So China, let's do a little bit of recap. China has been hit hard. China had to slaughter nearly 1 billion pigs because of swine flu last year. They slaughtered billions of birds at the beginning of this outbreak of COVID-19. They're heavily reliant on food from other countries. They actually do not make enough rice to feed their own people. They have to import it. So China is now going through a lot of civil unrest. A lot of their people are starting to rise up. They're desperate because their economy is still not back up and going. The technology they need from America, the food they need from South America, it's not coming in, right? They're getting more desperate than we are. So the collapse of the dollar is inevitable. And I think that one way you can collapse a dollar is to take us out by force. Another way is just to let us do it to ourselves. But China can only wait for so long. Oh yeah, China has never been able to feed its people. That's the thing. There was a time, and when I say never, I mean in ever since what they call the Great Leap Forward with Mao, who these people worship like he was a god, even though he killed hundreds of millions of his own people. There was I don't know if he was German or Russian, but there's a famous saying is that any society is only 3 miles away from chaos. Trust me, we're headed that way. All right, so we're going to read just a couple more articles. And let me go ahead and make this one there. Boom. All right, so we go here. This is what the Zimbabwe dollar. If you want to be a millionaire in Zimbabwe today, it's only going to cost you $2,700, $2,800. You'll be a millionaire in Zimbabwe. That's where we're headed. All right, the last thing is, as I was going to talk about, things are getting worse. Now, this is a recent article. When I say recent, it's somewhat recent. Just talking about more about Zimbabwe. And that they have been really bad. Now, here's the deal with even more connected with Zimbabwe is that we're doing the exact same thing. The only difference is that we're the world reserve currency, right? So if we're the world reserve currency, that means we can print money for as long as we're the world reserve currency. You couple the fact with that this price war is literally destabilizing our energy sector. It's destabilizing our oil production sector. This is an attack on us. Saudi Arabia is not trying to get America out of the way. Saudi Arabia needs needs us more than we need them. Make no mistake about that. That's how we got the petrodollar, was because Nixon struck a deal with the king that if they sold oil in the dollar, we'd back them up militarily, which, by the way, Saudi Arabia has been bombing Yemen for 3 years straight. You know, they've killed thousands and thousands and thousands of children. But no one in America knows about that because that's part of the deal, right? Now, Trump's administration, they threatened to remove aid, troops, and planes and all the stuff from Saudi Arabia if they didn't get this stuff worked out. So who knows where that's going to go? Trump's already said he can't stand OPEC. He's never liked OPEC. And then he kind of backtracked his word because, you know, while Americans might understand Trump at this point, that he just says shit off the cuff, the rest of the world may not know that. And when OPEC hears that, they come from different cultures where your words are your bond. And so that's why he does a lot of backtracking. So yeah, we're going to end that in the video here today, but just be aware that what we're entering right now is with all these stimulus checks coming out, the Fed has actually pumped 2.3 trillion additional dollars into the economy, additional on top of the $2.2 trillion stimulus package that we passed. All we're doing is devaluing the dollar. The more you have of physical print in circulation, the less value it has. And the moment we get knocked out from the world reserve currency, we will be Zimbabwe. We will no longer be a first world country. We will devolve into madness. And I just really want people to be aware of that and be prepared. You need to own things like gold and silver, so long as we don't have a total collapse. And I'll tell you how we have a total collapse. The only way we have a total collapse is if we get hit by an asteroid. We get hit by a comet. You wipe out 98% of humanity. That's how you have a total collapse. Anything outside of that is it's not a total collapse. If we have a total collapse, there's no survival, because the human version of a total collapse would be nuclear war. It only takes 2 to 3 nukes today to wipe out 60% of humanity. But if one country fires a single nuke at any other country, that country will fire everything it has at that country. Then that country will fire everything it has at that, and so forth. So you would have hundreds of nukes go off. It would render this earth unlivable for 100 years. So Murphy says, I am hoping Trump writes all these trillions off as bad debt. I've seen bookkeepers steal money from companies that way. Well, sure. There's actually a lot of companies, not countries, but companies across the world that are calling for a Jubilee, right? And so if you don't know what a Jubilee is every 49 years, I believe it's every 49 years, the Jewish government will forgive all debts. And so a lot of companies are calling for a world Jubilee. And honestly, that's the only way that this isn't going to have end result in a complete and utter chaotic collapse of the global economy. However, it needs to collapse. We need to get rid of globalization. It's no good for anybody except for the rich. And make no mistake, you can quote me now and you can hear me now and quote me later. We just witnessed the greatest transfer of wealth in human history. They have banned seed sales in Vermont and now in Michigan. It's coming across the board. So you got to buy seeds. You got to get some stuff to plant your seeds with. You need to get some precious metals. They're really hard to find, but go to your local coin dealers. Don't buy online anymore. Go to your local dealers. If you don't have precious metals, make sure you get some food, some water, some ammo, some personal protection. You get a bug out bag, get escape plan, because if you're living in a big city, there might come a time where those food trucks stop coming. Oh yeah, it is the biggest heist in history. It is, absolutely. But the thing is it's not even an orchestrated heist. They're literally doing it right in front of us. But when you have successfully dumbed down a population that cares more about catching up on Netflix and making memes about everything, they're not paying attention to literally all of their liberties being stripped away from them legally. We're not even doing it illegally. Just no one's paying attention to it. So you said you don't have... Yeah, I bought a whole bunch of seeds last month because I was watching a video of Ice Age farmers, and he was talking about, he had heard from the grapevine that seed production and seed selling could be reduced because of the number of crops that's been destroyed by the Grand Solar Minimum. So I went and bought seeds because of that. I had no clue that they would ban seeds. So anyway, so I'm gonna call this a night. Sweet Liberty, she says that's right. Deliveries will stop, and they will. Another channel I recommend for those watching the replay is Zombie Farmer. Now he's a food truck driver. He lives in Kentucky, I believe, and he has been telling people like what's going on and the fact that truck deliveries are getting ready to stop. So we need to really rely on each other and form communities ourselves. Look, the government is not coming to help us. They're not coming to save us. If you can get as many seeds. Now look, Murphy, if you can't afford seeds, don't forget you can go to the grocery store and get apples and oranges and things and take the seeds out of them and dry them. You can still get seeds that way. So, but anyway, I'm going to go ahead and call it a night, and I really thank you. But for future reference, this is for more or less for Murphy's Laws fans. We're going to be doing a sit down. We're going to get some type of collaboration going between her and I, and because we both use StreamYard, and we can actually interview and be on the same screen. So it's pretty cool. I've been learning a lot about it, and there's a lot of things I want to bounce off of Murphy before we get down to it. But yeah. So anyway, that's going to be the stream for tonight, and I won't be streaming for this weekend. But Monday, I'll be back in my house. I'm getting internet installed. I finally caved and put internet in my house. I've been coming to my mom's house and still in hers. So thankfully, we only live a couple blocks away from her. But before I close, I do want to tell you guys that in Murphy, you'll know what I'm talking about. In my county, which is Rutherford County, North Carolina, we have this cult here called Word of the Faith. And we only had a couple of cases of COVID in our county, which is basically a really small county. And it jumped to 35 in a matter of 3 days because of this cult. They ignored all social distancing. And it's the same exact story as the Daegu cult church that spread that outbreak in South Korea. Yeah, I know you're in North Carolina. That's why I was thinking you might have heard of these people. But yeah, they're a cult, and they've caused 35 additional or 29 additional cases come from this one church, and this is all in a matter of 3 days. So we've been really watching it. It's right up the road from me. So, all right, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and call it a night, and thank you for being here, and I'll see you guys later.